you avoid quarantine in China? Stop moving around. So we just moved to a hospital, no less. And when we were moving, there was a case in Luzhou where we were coming from, so there was a possibility we'd have to quarantine. And you better believe we'd make a video about quarantine. I had planned before this all exploded. In November 2020, I was finally gonna go back and visit the US for Thanksgiving. And there was stuff like I have new nieces and nephews that I haven't seen in a while or ever, and I haven't seen my sister's house, and I haven't had a good Thanksgiving dinner in a long time. Naively, I had the thought last summer, it's a good thing COVID happened mostly in the winter and is going away now, because wearing a mask is not a problem here, but in the summer it's just so hot. And then, you know, don't go. At the time, I think if you left China, it wasn't certain that you could come back. And for some people, that was a chance they were willing to take because they were more attached to their US life than their Chinese life, and that's, you know. I do love my family, I love to see them. Honestly, I don't have that many friends left in America, but the big reason I don't go back that often is I just can't stand the flight. In recent years, I've added environmental concern, but really, sitting for 12 hours on an airplane drives me nuts, and I just can't do it. And in our early time in China, we took our vacations, we traveled around China. I think the concept of quarantine is actually pretty cool. I mean, the vaccines that we as humanity developed is remarkable. The IP fights ensuing are less remarkable, but quarantine is such a lovely low-tech solution. A virus thrives on new hosts, so deprive it of new hosts. Here's what's kind of irritating. As a person who did lock down and does take precautions and has made sacrifice is a big word for not going to a concert, but I've made choices that I didn't want to make for the greater public safety. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who are also frustrated and are also paying attention to the rules, that it does seem like there's still so many people who don't feel the need to acquiesce to the fact that there's a international pandemic. For me, if I couldn't make it back into China, that would have been a disaster. My job is here, my life is here, my husband is here, everything. My computers are here. I do too have friends, just in case you're watching this and going, hey, I don't keep in the greatest touch with everybody, and because I don't have Facebook, whatever. But my attitude is much more. Peter said this when we lived in New York, that he was like, I live in New York, you should come visit me. And I feel like, I live in China, you should come visit me. And several people have threatened to, but only my parents have made it so far. But hopefully, once all this shenanigan ends, I don't expect anyone to quarantine just to see me. If you've read any think pieces over the past 2 years, you might know this already, but quarantine comes from 40 ships off the coast of Italy that they were like, you can't come in, you're sick. You can come in when you're not sick. So they'd stayed on those 40 ships until they weren't sick anymore. Which is like that, and like, just wash your damn hands. We have these low-tech weapons, masks too. And to me, it still doesn't make sense to leave. Because I don't even know for sure, like, how did these people know they'd be able to quarantine and come back? It's easy to judge other people's behavior. Everybody's doing it wrong. And it's also easy to excuse why you're the exception. And not just pandemic-wise, this is kind of a problem all over the place, is that we're all condemning everyone else while finding why it's okay for us to do the same thing. So it's not like necessarily a bad thing that quarantine is being used. Although from the prevalence of quarantine videos on YouTube, I feel like people are treating it like an ibuprofen. You can't just pop a quarantine. Where are you going all the time? If we did make a quarantine video, it would probably be pretty boring. It would be mostly what video games am I playing on my iPad. Also, it occurs to me, Peter and I probably wouldn't be allowed to quarantine together, which I just treat us like a unit because Peter doesn't leave the house. So I'm like, if I don't have it, he doesn't have it. But I don't know if that's how the government would feel about it. And I'm not saying this to say like, oh, look at me, I follow the rules. Shouldn't you be like me? Oh, it's so unfair. I say it more because to me, the puzzle of how do we stop this virus that doesn't have any vested interests but only wants to reproduce through human contact? How do we as a human species band together and contain it? We didn't have to quarantine when we moved, but I did have to get 3 nucleic acid tests in 2 weeks. The one where they stick it all the way up into your brain stem, which actually I was pretty impressed at how efficient the hospital is set up to do these tests. And like when we go around to public places, we have to show our health code and a different code that's a travel pass. I'm a little confused, but I just do it because I just do what they tell me because I do actually believe they're keeping me safe. How often do expats go home? Even before the pandemic, I really didn't go that often. Maybe in 10 years, I went home 4 times for like a wedding, a 60th birthday. I didn't go home for baby births. It's not my baby. I mean, I love my niece and nephews, but I guess you're not supposed to go to the hospital if you're not having the baby. But I do know that other expats go home much more often than I do. We know some people who go home like twice a year. And, you know, it's cool. And the rhetoric is very galling of, you know, if we lose our freedoms, the terrorists win. The virus is not a terrorist and does not have an agenda and doesn't care if you're scared or not. The only way it wins is if you're mingling with other people and keep passing it around. Because as I said, I don't like all this war rhetoric around it. It's not a war, it's a cooperation. It's a human cooperation. So I got vaccinated, I do the tests, I do the contact tracing efforts, I cooperate. And I think like, if we could have gotten it together, this would have been an amazing human achievement. By which I'm more than implying this was a human disaster and we failed, which doesn't bode well for the coming climate change issues we're facing. There is no fight them on the beaches. Stop going to the beaches. Although I guess outside activities are supposed to be okay. I don't really get all this jamming back and forth to your home country and back to China just because you're allowed to do it. It seems inconvenient. I mean, I hate air travel anyway. And then to add on the specter of 2 weeks in isolation when you get back, who's choosing that? I mean, I understand there's maybe emergency situations, but if it's voluntary, why are you choosing that? It's just so frustrating that there's this unwillingness to even slightly inconvenience yourself, it seems. And it's hard because I only experience America now through the news and, you know, phone calls back home, which my family is generally very positive. So it's been weird to have these conversations that are just, and I'm sure you are having these conversations too, where like, it just sucks. There's not a bright side to it. All right, well, have a good day. I depressed myself out of my point. Oh, the people who are just unwilling to inconvenience themselves just a little. That's how it appears to me by reading the news. But by also like the factual events or what's happening, there are people who aren't complying. And there's complicated reasons for that. And like I said, everybody thinks they have a good reason. And some of those people are right, that they are a good exception. But COVID doesn't care about your exception. So I just don't go back that much. But I know that's not everybody's way. They go home and stock up on sausage. Why is that what came into my mind? We are gonna have to take on some inconveniences if we're gonna get through this. And the people, I think, who are selling this line of, we're not gonna eradicate COVID, but we're gonna learn to live with COVID, is this fucking slap in the face to all the frontline workers and all the poorly paid workers who weren't given support and had to go do these heroic jobs anyway and then just died. It's hard to bring this back around to hopeful again, but that is my tendency. So I can only hope that it's not too late. We can band together. We can do amazing things as a society. We have amazing technology at our disposal. We have online classes that can reach more people than ever. We have quarantine as the lowest tech form of disease prevention we've got. We've got these vaccines, and I think we as humans are finding innovative ways to help each other every day. And that's the part to focus on, because I know it's hard around the world. Every single person on earth, except rich assholes who can protect themselves from this with their money. But we have an opportunity to do amazing things, and we still do. We could still get it together. It's gonna be at least another year, maybe another couple years. It's lunchtime. I read somewhere recently that after periods of mass death, like the Spanish flu and others, historically we see a global rise in fascism, which we kind of already were in the middle of before the pandemic. But that's why I think hope is not just this like bright sighting, put your head in the sand. I think it's necessary. We need that so we can remember to love each other and our common humanity, and we don't slide into the shit. We can do better because we have to.